It's getting to be that time. We don't ever want to lie, but I mean, if you're going to lie about college football, if you're going to present mistruths out there, you got to get that stuff out of the way in the spring. Because the closer you get to the regular season, the more people are paying attention, and the closer the games are to outing you. So we got to tell the truth tonight, and that's what this show is going to be about. I got a lot of truth to tell about this sport. It is Tuesday, July 1st, the year of our Lord 2025, brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're high atop and jam-packed, a lovely downtown Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah, it occurs to me sometimes we need to remind people what we're about. And tonight, I have to do that in the way of telling you what the biggest lies are in this sport. I'm going to tell you about some biggest questions that we have. I'm going to tell you about some big truths. I've got some big chaos. It's a really big show. It's a really big show. We wouldn't do it if it wasn't. And we're jam-packed as usual. They are watching us in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Denver, Colorado, Midland, Texas. Thank you guys so much. We're doing the show on Tuesday. We won't have one on Thursday. Our next show will be Sunday. Got the groundskeeping, got the housekeeping out of the way, and it's time to go. That's a very, very compacted intro. So don't ever call me long-winded. You should. We're working on it. We're working on shortening those intros. Okay, I had a question that I wanted to lead the show with. Because sometimes I don't know where we should fit these sorts of things in, but this is July. We're in July, by the way. This is a really good time to put a question like this in. So the way it works is we've done this show for a while now. So there may be segments that we did, 2 years ago. And I think to myself, well, Jesse, if we're putting a show together, like, should we really do that segment again? Because we've already done it. Well, what you got to remember is what Nico says here. So Nico hit me up. He said, as a part of my Pate State pledge, we should all take it. He said, I got some new friends listening to the show. Can you go back through some of your biggest lies so the newbies can get some quality education? Now, he's not talking about lies I've told. We all know I've never done that. But there are big lies. I've got several of them written right here. There are lies that people tell about college football. And if you're new, this is Pate State. This is a campus where we try and educate. We don't go as far as to indoctrinate, but we go right up to the line of education, to the point of indoctrination, but we want to indoctrinate you with the truth. So there are big lies that people tell about college football, and here's what you can't fall victim to. You can't fall victim to just because someone says something or a group of people says something over and over and over again that you accept it. And I'm going to give you the first one that we hammer on all the time. And so I'm going to skip through this one pretty quick. You are what your record says you are is a huge lie in college football, and its close personal cousin, a win is a win. I'm going to pause. I know we have a lot of new people watching and listening to the show, and you may have thought to yourself, well, hold on, but a win is a win. But you are what your record says you are. It's okay. It's okay. It's not the middle of the season. This is the time to get the erroneous thinking and logic out of the room. I've had to do it before. There's stuff I used to believe about college football that I don't believe anymore. Some of them are on this list. You're not always what your record says you are. A lot of you love the NFL. You watch the Sunday game. You are what your record says you are in the NFL. A win is a win in the NFL. Not so ironically, a lot of these sayings were born in professional sports, and then a bunch of people who used to solely cover pro sports started to cover college football when college football got bigger, and they took the pro sports ideologies to the college game, and it doesn't always apply, and this is one of them. So, do we want to do a little research here? Do we want to do some field research? Let's just say Pate State is playing Texas and Georgia to start the season. I lose both of the games by a field goal. 30-27, 31-28. I lost both games by a field goal. I am 0-2. I got 2 losses. I'm 0-2. You go play East Texas State and Portland State, and you win both of those games by a field goal. Who is the better team? Who should be ranked higher? Whose performance to date has been more impressive? And you either fit into one of two camps. You either look and say, well, 2-0 is always better than 0-2. You either look and say, well, 2 wins is always better than 2 losses, or you understand the relativity that has to enter the equation when you're talking about college football because of the vast disparity in strength of schedule and even strength of opponent. Because, again, we do this really crazy thing in the college football world where we pretend over 100 teams are playing the same sport. Whereas, in the NFL, it's 32. So it's a lot easier to talk like that than it is in college football. So, no, you're not always what your record says you are. That's a lie. You could be, but not always. And 10-2 is not always equal to every other 10-2 out there. All right, next up, next big lie. I'm glad you asked me about this. Recruiting rankings don't matter. Well, that's a lie. Recruiting rankings very much matter. Now, you will notice that you may have said this before. You certainly have heard other people say this before. Normally, this is not when your team lands a 5-star. Normally, this is not when your team lands a top 5 class. Normally, it's when your rival down the road just landed a 5-star, or your rival down the road landed a top 10, top 5 class, and you're going into defense mode, and you hope, which is okay, you hope that kid is a bust. So it's a little twisted, but it's okay. It's the Wild West of fandom out here. Or you hope that maybe they do like Texas A&M a couple of years ago, where they have this highly rated class, but it all falls apart. Yeah, that could happen. But more than likely, it's not going to happen. So the best recruiting averages the last 4 years: Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, LSU, Oklahoma, Miami, Notre Dame, Texas A&M. What do you notice there? You notice a ton of teams that not just in a given year, but annually are competing for the national championship. You will also be quick to point out probably, but Josh, what about Miami? You're right. That's an exception. Well, Texas A&M hasn't. You're right. That's an exception. Also, you'll notice you had to go a little further down the list. There were no fraudulent teams at the top of the list, were they? And what about Alabama last year, Josh? Yes, the first team out of the playoff, replacing the greatest head coach of all time. Yes, there's your exception to the rule. So recruiting rankings do matter. Verbal commitments also matter. It's July right now, and so there's been a lot of verbal commits, and you'll also notice anytime there's a verbal commit, someone says, oh, that doesn't mean anything, check back in December. And the insinuation there is like the verbal commit means nothing. No, the verbal commit doesn't mean everything, because it is true that some kids will decommit, but it's also true that the vast majority of them won't. So anyone that tries to discredit the verbal commitment, or they especially try and discredit just the overall rankings industry, they are living on exceptions, not the rule. Next up, I think this one came from the NFL ranks as well. If you got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any. That's a lie. Case by case, that's a lie. So as a catch-all belief system, it's a lie. Now, it could be that you're a team that has nothing at the quarterback position, and the reason that there's still a QB battle going on, the reason there's still 2 guys splitting reps 3rd week into fall camp is because neither one of them have taken the job. That could happen. Here's what else could happen. You could have Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts on the same team. That could happen. You could have what Ohio State had in 2014, where they end up winning a national title with their 3rd stringer. That could happen. You could have Graham Mertz starting for you, and he goes down and DJ Lagway comes in and saves your season. That could happen. Point being, sometimes there is quarterback competition because you got none, and that's where that age-old adage came from. If you got 2 quarterbacks, you ain't got any. But you could also have 2 guys that would be starting virtually anywhere else, and it just so happens that some head coach out there has convinced both of them to play for him, and they're just battling it out. And usually you know that because usually you're getting feedback from camp, and people are like, I remember I brought Tua up because I remember them saying that about Tua Tagovailoa when he was a true freshman. Jalen Hurts is the entrenched starter at Alabama, and all people could talk about is the backup dude whose name we can't pronounce. There was a guy on a message board that worried whether the language barrier was going to hurt Tua, because he's a Hawaiian. How's he going to speak English, right? That actually happened. So that's not always the case. And certainly when someone just says it blanketly, that's a lie. Another lie. This is where it gets a little more controversial, because some of you will disagree with me on this, but another lie is the bigger the playoff, the more the opportunity. That's a lie. The bigger the playoff, the more opportunity you have to make the playoffs. That's true. Of course, that's true. But by that logic, we should expand it to 136. Therefore, everybody gets the opportunity to make the playoff. No, when they say there's more opportunity, the bigger the playoff is. They mean there's more opportunities to potentially win a national championship. And I know why people say that, because on the surface, you think to yourself, if we used to only have 4 in, that meant only 4 teams could win the national title. But if we put 12 in, or 14, or 16, that means 12 teams, or 14 teams, or 16 teams have a chance to win a national championship. But they don't. They don't. Mathematically, they all do. Just like when that meteorite landed in South Carolina the other day. Hey, man, someone woke up that morning with a small non-zero chance that that was going to happen in their backyard. Realistically, what were the odds of that happening? So in college football terms, yeah, SMU mathematically could have won the national title last year. Boise State mathematically could have won the national title. It is true that mathematically speaking, there was a non-zero chance of them winning it. In reality, there was no chance of them winning it. The reality is the best shot one of those Cinderellas ever had was the 4-team field. As crazy as that sounds to you, and I'm going to give you evidence. We are, 2 years removed? 3 years removed now from TCU playing for a literal national championship. You realize that? Well, Josh, they didn't win it. Oh, I know. They got splattered against Georgia in the national title game, but they played for a national championship. And do you know why? They played for a national championship because they existed in a year where your Ohio States or your Alabamas or whatnot, they could lose like 1 game at the end of the year, and if they lose at the wrong time and the field's structured the right way, they're out. They're out of the playoff. I mean, Georgia famously a few years ago is coming off back-to-back titles. They go to their conference title game and lose, and they're out of the playoff. That's the best shot that the Cinderella ever had. That's the biggest opportunity they ever had. Cincinnati made the playoff, but the better way to look at that is Cincinnati made the Final Four in the 4-team model. TCU made it to the national championship game in the 4-team model. The trade-off here is many, many more Cincinnatis and TCUs and teams of that caliber will make the playoff now. None of them will ever go deep in the playoff, go to the national championship game. And the reason is because of what Ohio State did last year. Any former life, Ohio State is out. They lose to Michigan, they're out. But all the playoff does is give second chances or third chances to the teams with the rosters actually capable of making it that deep in the postseason once they have access. And so it's this big trade-off that we did. It's kind of a sleight of hand trick of, hey, you want to expand the playoff? Yeah, so you guys have more opportunity? And enough people said, yeah, let's do it. And then some people still haven't realized this, although as you get deeper and deeper into this area, you will. It comes at the expense of any Cinderella ever having an opportunity to make any kind of run to a championship game. I never cared about that much, but a lot of people do. So that's a lie. And final lie that I wanted to hit tonight. This is not an exhaustive list, by the way. Everything done in the name of money has to be done. That is a lie. You see it all over the place. We just talked about playoff expansion. Why don't you guys expand to the playoff? Well, I mean, think about the millions and billions more dollars that we could make. Well, that doesn't equal you have to do it, but that's not where it stops. Let me talk about something that really hits you close to home. When's the last time that you renewed your season tickets and it was cheaper than it was the year before? When is the last time you renewed that space that you tailgate? Some of you have to pay a fee for that. When's the last time that the price stayed static or got lower? Concessions, ditto. Why does that have to go up? Well, it doesn't have to go up, is the answer. It goes up because in some cases you have irresponsible spending. In other cases, you've got people in the administrative state that have figured out how to make a living off of raising fees anywhere that they possibly can and then pocketing enough of it to justify their existence. And so in college football, or whether it's over on the media ecosystem side of college football, you sit through a 4-minute, 15-second commercial break in between quarters. Well, it doesn't have to be that long. It doesn't have to be, but it's going to be because in the name of money, we have to do that. You go to your stadium and there's signage and branding all over the place. Oh, it doesn't have to look like that, but it's going to look like that. Why? because there's more money to be made. Sometimes it's necessary. Other times it's not. Other times it's not. Dare I go as far as to use the word, I'm not going to say greed. No. There are no greedy people in this sport. Absolutely not. They're watching us at Academy Sports and Outdoors. They're not greedy. They're not greedy. They want you to come. They want you to come and visit them, but they're not going to beg, because I'm going to beg for them. Please go to Academy Sports and Outdoors. Please do that, friends. Look around us. We got July 4th coming up. Can you imagine the sunburn if you don't have one of those Academy tents? I've got it on good authority. The other tents don't even block sun. It's unofficial. We haven't confirmed that, but I heard possibly they don't. Academy tents do. And you need grilling equipment? Yes, you do. Academy's got it. You may think to yourself, I thought that was a sporting goods store. Well, it's not 1957 in the town square. Yes, they got sporting goods, but they got so much more than that. You need some footwear. You need fishing gear. Of course, you can get your traditional sporting goods there as well. You can go get Big League Chew there. Anything and everything. The other day, I made a joke on air. I said, about the only thing you can't get there is medical supplies. Someone went to an Academy and took a picture of a first aid kit they bought there. So I really don't know what it is they don't offer there. Academy.com if you can't get there in person. Let's roll on. Got several more things to talk about on the show here tonight. It's the time of year where rankings are being released, media days are around the corner. A lot of people are going to be glass half full. And that's okay. I like to have a smile on my face this time of year too, but one of the themes on the show lately has been, I don't know if there's really a team to beat this year. There's just a lot of teams near the top. And because there's no team to beat, I got to justify that by saying there are healthy amounts of questions with every one of these teams. Like when I said that the other night, people were asking, really, well, what's the big weakness for Texas? The big weakness for Georgia? I didn't say they're weaknesses. They could be weaknesses. Right now, they just qualify as questions. So I wanted to do some of these teams tonight because we can run down the list. If you're just looking at the odds to win it all, Georgia's going to be way up there. All right, so what are the biggest questions about Georgia? Well, being able to run the ball effectively, that's definitely going to be one of them. Line play, both sides of the ball, I would look there as well. It was very uncharacteristic of them last year. They were 102nd in rush yards per game. Crazy. I don't think they're going to be that bad again this year. But, think about how much they have to improve to get back to the former version of themselves. They got to replace 4 offensive linemen. If you were that poor last year, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to have new bodies there. That makes it a question, though. And then over on the defensive side, this is something that if you're a hardcore Georgia fan and you like have your 2 deep memorized, you go back in time a few years, you had a 2 deep littered with guys that were going to go on and play Sunday ball or at least had the potential to. And Christian Miller's back there this year. Outside of that, Elo Medozi is a guy they went and got from Army that they think will be a really good player, and I agree with them. He'll be a really good player, but Xavier McLeod, like Jordan Hall, these are not bad players. Please don't misunderstand me. There's a difference in really solid player versus the kind of player that Georgia used to have all over the place up front on the defensive line. Now, I know they're going to clip this, and I know they're going to play it in the building, and they should, because it is possible that coaching staff, one of the very best in the country, could end up getting a whole lot more out of one or multiples of those guys than you think possible. That's why it's a question. It's not a weakness. Look at Ohio State. I'd say the same thing about their defensive line. You had 4 defensive linemen last year, not only that are gone, but they were also integral parts of your leadership. So you got to replace the talent and production, and you got to replace the leadership. They've got former blue chippers to backfill, but here's what always happens in college football. So when you lose a bunch of guys from one unit, not only do you have to pay attention to the fact that, okay, well, you're backfilling there with guys that were big names in recruiting but are unproven, the names behind them. Okay, your 2 deep that's your starting line, and then your second layer, which is going to have to come into play. How effective can they be? Do you have championship caliber depth there? And also the coordinators. Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles may have been the best OC-DC combo in the country last year. And you are elevating Brian Hartline to offensive coordinator. You're bringing in Matt Patricia at defensive coordinator. These are first-timers at the college level having the jobs they're going to have this year. Not saying it's a weakness. I'm saying it's a question. That's all it can be in July is a question. At Ole Miss, man, I'm high on Austin Simmons. Technically, he hasn't proven anything, but I'm high on Austin Simmons. But I'm telling you, the biggest question about this team to me is defensive regression. It's going to happen. I mean, Ole Miss last year, they were second defensively in points per game allowed. They were second defensively in rush yards allowed per game. They were first in the country in sacks. They will fall off. I just am questioning how much they're going to fall off. Because if Golding still has that team playing like top 15 defense, they could win the league if Austin Simmons is what I think he's going to be. But that's really difficult to do. Really, really difficult to do, especially year to year, given the volatility of the approach they use. Just bringing in portal guys. I don't think this portal class they just brought in has the pop necessarily that the previous one did. So you're pairing all of that with a new quarterback. There's just a lot that has to fall into place. They've still got a workable schedule, but a lot of that stuff's got to fall into place. So to me, it's nice that it's not front-loaded. They get Georgia State to start. They go to Kentucky week 2, Arkansas week 3. Not easy opponents, but like they're not going to Georgia in week 1 or 2. They're not playing LSU week 1 or 2. And lastly, for tonight, what about Notre Dame? 5 minutes ago, Notre Dame played for a national championship. Still crazy to say. All right, so the quarterback position and defensive line. Those are two of the main areas that I question. CJ Carr, I have said before, I'll say again, I think his upside gives them more potential in the passing game than at any point during Marcus Freeman's tenure there. I think the personnel they have out wide, if CJ Carr is the real deal, they could fulfill that prophecy of having the best passing game they've had since he's been there. You know they'll be able to run the ball. I got very little question about that, but it's the promise versus the production. That's kind of what makes it a question. CJ Carr has played in one game. So there's no proven production there, but yet there's a reason why he is there, if that makes any sense. So the same thing over on defense, specifically on the defensive line, Riley Mills and Howard Cross, Oben, like those guys being gone, you kind of come to know that you can trust Notre Dame to have quality backfills. It's just what caliber do they backfill at? Like, do they come in and grab the rope and pull every bit as hard as the frontline guys did last year? Is there a 10% drop-off? Are they vulnerable in like one specific area more so than last year's team? That's just normal football. It's college football. Like that's what it is. So those aren't weaknesses. They're just questions right now. Let's move it along. I told you we're going to tell the truth tonight. And in the interest of truth, it's a very honest show, I guess. What's the truth about Brent Venables? We've been doing the Truth Teller series lately. And I think the truth about Brent Venables at Oklahoma is 2025 is as important for him as 2025 will be for any head coach in major college football. He went from 6-7 to 10-3, back to 6-7 last year. Oh man, everyone was so ready for them to go from 10-3 to jumping into the playoff conversation. Jackson Arnold, like it was supposed to be his era. It just wasn't. It was dead on arrival. I'm not putting it all on Jackson Arnold. Like there was a lot wrong with the offense last year. So he goes and he hires Ben Arbuckle as his new offensive coordinator from Washington State. It's got to work. It's got to work. You can't whiff twice on that hire. And it's got to work. Now, I think it will work, but I've got to be right there. It's got to work. One of the things you always want to look at is how does a place look once a guy leaves? So how did Clemson look once Brent Venables leaves? This is why I got no doubts about the guy's football mind, and anyone who doubts that, I think probably there's a different discussion to have. That Clemson identity changed a little bit when Venables left. In fact, a good bit. And conversely, you look at Oklahoma defensively. They went from 122nd to 79th to 19th. So that's taken over for Lincoln Riley. There was no defensive identity to speak of there when Venables walked in. And so he immediately got to work on the side of the ball he specializes in. It's just doesn't really mean anything if you don't have the quarterback play and you don't have the OC worked out on the other side. But I do think he's at the best place he can possibly be. Like if you're a head coach that's a first-time head coach, if you're a first-time head coach, if you're in desperation mode, you can at least rest assured that at Oklahoma, you'll have everything you need. You'll have good players, you'll have good administrative support, facilities, like everything, the support, everything you need there to win is there. You've got to win. I think it's completely fair. This is not his first year. No one's saying you got to come in and win immediately. There's a reason why they wanted him. He reflects the values and principles of Oklahoma. I think his sort of identity and belief system reflects that of Oklahoma. The fan base wanted him. There's a reason, because they see a lot of themselves in him. But that's all assuming you're a winner. That's all assuming you know how to win. And it's totally fair to give the coach everything on the plate that he's going to need, and by year 4, expect him to be winning big at Oklahoma. That's fair. Brent Venables wouldn't disagree with that. He knows that's fair. So that's the beauty of competition, isn't it? That's the beauty of coaching in major college football, when you got a place that's structurally sound, and Oklahoma's about as good as it gets in that category, and they come in and your guys come in and you're given a little bit of time. I mean, by year 4, you ought to be humming. And if it's not, then there's a tougher conversation. Wow, I don't know where that comes from. That's watching too much Netflix, because that is not my natural accent. It's just crazy how much this time last year, people thought, me included, people thought that Brent Venables' name would be linked to Jackson Arnold. And it's got to be John Mateer, as it turns out. I mean, think about saying that a year ago. A year ago, Jackson Arnold is the former Elite 11 MVP, and he's come in and he's sat for a year, and now he's going to be the starting quarterback at Oklahoma, like he's the quarterback of the future. That was the way it was. Think about saying this time last year, no, I'll tell you who Brent Venables is going to have to hitch his wagon to is John Mateer. The kid at Washington State, yep. What's going to happen? Like, you would want to know what's about to happen. Is Jackson Arnold going to quit football? No, it just wasn't a good situation. So this has got to be the year. That's the truth about Venables. This has got to be the year that he makes it happen. They're watching us in Fort Worth, Texas, Oceanside, California, and Biloxi, Mississippi, which reminds me, for no reason in particular, Cream Soda Zevia has made a return for the second show in a row. Don't call it a comeback quite yet. I will tell you, and the folks at Zevia can do with this whatever they want, management walked in the office today during work hours and drank a Zevia. And we didn't ask him to. We didn't record it. It wasn't for content. It was room temperature. It wasn't even cold. And he downed that thing. Like, during conversation, he wasn't even doing it performatively. Now, the stock price could plummet at that news becoming public. And so I'm taking a risk even revealing this. I'm not telling you Zevia is the choice of management. I'm telling you that there was nothing else around, and I handed him one, and he did drink it. So if you're more the sweater vest, country club, gated community type, Zevia could be for you as well. We found that out earlier today. We had a question that I didn't know where to put it in the show. So I just told Jesse, toss it in there somewhere. This is interesting. I guarantee every one of you will have an opinion on this. Andy from Monterey, California said, in your best estimation, who's the biggest face of sports media? Now that is a loaded question. I got my answer, but I do want to know, before I answer it, this is the kind of question I want to give you a little runway with. Anybody listening or watching, biggest face of sports media today? Not college football media. He said sports media, all of sports media. Who's the biggest face of sports media to you? To me, it came down to two names, really. And a lot of you are going to say Stephen A. Smith. I actually went with two other names. Nothing against Stephen A. I think it is Pat McAfee, and I think it's Scott Van Pelt. Scott Van Pelt is actually my number one for the face of sports media. Scott Van Pelt has done something I don't know that I've ever watched anyone else do. In fairness, no one else has had the opportunity to do this. And what I mean is, Scott Van Pelt, he needs to earmuff himself for a second, was one of my favorites when I was a kid. You see that hairline? And when I was a kid, Scott Van Pelt was on the scene. Well, what does that mean? That means he's been around a long time. But that means Scott Van Pelt has existed in the public arena across the entire expanse of the birth of digital media. The birth of like social media, digital media, streaming. It's so much change happening in that world. So much change about the way people consume sports. So much change about what used to be accepted, what was the norm, what was loved, what was hated, and all that stuff is churned and churned and churned. It's like existing in a hurricane, and he's been a constant. He's been a constant face of sports media, and he's never lost his likability. That is borderline impossible to do. And think about how many people that were prominent in media in general in the 90s and early 2000s did not roll with changes and did not evolve with the times and got left behind. And either they're still around now and viewed as a dinosaur, or they're just not around and you find yourself Googling their name. I wonder what happened to so-and-so. Van Pelt's never been off the front page. And he was born in an era where you literally got your news on the front page of a piece of paper, and now he's still number one, as far as I'm concerned, in his space. And it's 2025. In fact, he's elevated to such a level that he gets to take months off in the summer. He's like a school teacher, just a whole lot better paid. And then the other part of that, I joke about the salary, but I don't know if you guys realize this. Scott Van Pelt's pretty well off financially, as he should be. He's probably still underpaid. Do you know how difficult it is to make the kind of money Scott Van Pelt's made on the stage that Scott Van Pelt's been on for as long as he has, and still be able to go to like Topeka, Kansas and ask people about him, and they would tell you, yeah, he's one of us, man. Like Van Pelt's one of us. He feels like one of us. I'm telling you, it's almost, if not impossible, to do that. The very nature of what success brings you will serve to separate you from the rest of society, unless you consciously make an effort to remain a part of society. Like Van Pelt doesn't have to implode in on himself in Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport the day after the national title game. Dude could fly private every day and twice on Monday if he wanted to, but he doesn't. And so as a result, and that's just one anecdote, but as a result of that, somehow, I mean, the dude's got way more zeros in his bank account than the rest of America, pretty much, the 99%. And yet the 99% look at him and say, yeah, I relate to that dude. Like, he's one of us. And it's not an act. It's not an act at all. So, like, that to me, that's the face of sports media. And also, some of the biggest criticisms that people have about some of the other big names in sports media, he's avoided completely. And he's got an entire sports center named after him, and has for a long time. So, like, my favorite work he did was when he was with Russillo during the radio show. Like, if I could take, like, a Scott Van Pelt era, I'd take that era even over the Sports Center era of Scott Van Pelt. That was my favorite, because I was working in the fabric warehouse at the time. So I'd listen to Cowherd in the morning, and I would listen to Van Pelt and Russillo, and that stretch they had, it was several years, that stretch they had on radio, it was my favorite radio show. Oh, I loved it, man. Loved the dynamic. And so he could be around as long as he wants to. I doubt he'll hang around forever, but he could do it as long as he wants to. Then the other side of that coin is Pat McAfee is everywhere. People are probably going to be a little bit more polarized about that than they are Scott Van Pelt. But you got to understand something. You got to understand what Pat means for folks like me. You got to understand that I don't have a J school degree from Northwestern or Syracuse hanging on my wall. And so for a long time, I did not see an entry point for myself. I didn't. I looked and I said, I'd love to do sports media for a living. I have no idea how. And then this entire streaming thing happened. Platforms like YouTube and Facebook, even at the time, they start letting you stream live, and you look at it and say, well, hold on. So it used to be that, like, overhead and distribution were the barriers of entry for me to get in this business. But now you're holding both of those in your hand if you have a cell phone. And this happened overnight. So that was the gateway for people like me to at least have a shot. Like, if I'm really good at all about what I do, and if I could really, engage an audience, well, now I got a shot. And that's the way it turned out. But at every step of the way, You are fighting conventional wisdom. You are the salmon. You're having to swim upstream. You're having to convince management that's invested in terrestrial and linear their entire careers, hey, we need to look at digital. And you get laughed out of the room. They got 35, 40 years experience on you that's telling them you can't monetize that. So like every step of the way, you're having to fight that fight. And then against all odds, you finally make it happen and you're convincing some advertisers, hey, maybe redirect 1 or 2% of your ad spend over here to the digital side. I promise we're going to build an audience. I promise it. I know that life. So to watch him do what he's done on a much bigger scale, you got to understand there are elements of it that you could only appreciate fully if you've had to live that life. And you also got to understand when you have a disruptor in your space, you could either do one of two things. You could be stupid and be envious of it and take shots at it, or you get behind it like they do at Talladega and you could draft. And you need to understand how much money is going to be brought into your space as a result of someone like that doing what he's doing. Sort of a keystone element to that. A keystone species affects the entire ecosystem. Well, a guy like that affects the entire ecosystem. And so, like, for a different reason than Van Pelt, I think maybe Pat McAfee is the other face. You could make the argument for Stephen A. Smith, too. I happen to go those two routes when I'm talking face of sports media. We went long on that, man. I had a lot to say, as it turns out. Let's continue. Let's hop back on the college football rails here. We've been playing this game around here by looking at teams and just flat out guessing, are they going to be better this year than they were last year or worse? Let's start with Tennessee tonight. They were 10-2 last year. Their over-under win total this year is 8.5. I think they're going to be worse than they were last year. I mean, there's not much further to go up. And then you had the whole Nico drama, but even before the Nico drama, they're 110th in offensive returning production. I guess that's kind of counting Nico being gone. Joey Aguilar comes in, and there's a lot of hope at quarterback that Josh Heupel can pull a miracle out of him. He's turnover prone, man, or has been. We don't have room for that, especially because we lose some big defensive pieces. Is defense going to be able to carry them again? Offensive line's a pretty big question. They knew that. Wide receiver, don't know the caliber of ball they're going to play there. So 10-2 last year, I think Tennessee drops off a little bit. So I'm going to go worse there. USC's different story. USC was 6-6 last year. Their over-under win total 7-5. They're going to be better. They're just going to be better. The law of averages and desperation suggests they've got to be better. This stat right here, we normally only do this during the season. This is a paper popper of a stat. I just look at it in disbelief, immunity. I can't believe this is real. USC led 5 Big Ten games in the fourth quarter last year that they lost. I'm going to repeat for effect. USC led 5 Big Ten games in the fourth quarter last year, ... that they lost. How is the first question. Sacks and tackles for loss, I think, are going to improve on that team this year. They look better on the line of scrimmage. They got players that look like they should be playing on the line of scrimmage, O-line, D-line in the Big Ten. Jacoby Lane is going to be a standout wide receiver 1 this year. They've just got to be better. I mean, 7-5 would be better. We're just talking regular season here. What about Florida State? I don't know why we're doing this. Florida State's going to be better than 2-10. I don't know what more. I mean, what do you want from me? They play Kent State and something called East Texas A&M this year. They got to win those games to be at least 2-10. Kent State is 136th in preseason S&P Plus. That's last in all of FBS. And East Texas A&M, Commerce, Texas, Jesse, isn't that right? Playing Florida State, yeah. I don't really know what kind of argument you want from me. Like, the bus is going to get to the stadium. All the players are going to have oxygen to breathe. They're going to be better than 2-10. And Kansas State, this one's tricky. Kansas State was 8-4 last year. They got an over-under win total of 8.5. I'm going with Kansas State being the same as they were last year. I know Avery Johnson's back. I know that. You don't always just get huge improvement just because a guy returns. I think Avery Johnson is who he is. He's a good player. I think he is who he is as a quarterback. I think there are questions along that offensive line. Sort of a middle-of-the-pack secondary last year, counting on some portal backfills there. They go to Baylor, they go to Kansas, they go to Oklahoma State. That'd be interesting. But they get Texas Tech. They got to go to Utah. That back half of their schedule is not easy. And I just think it's a lot of close games. 8-4 sounds about right to me. So I'm not going to go too different on Kansas State this year as opposed to last year. Let's move it merrily along. Got a good pace here on the show. We did like an hour and a half the other night. And I don't mind, but I know some of you like to fit this into your commute to work. So we're going a little more up-tempo here. Some of the biggest questions in college football this year, we've sort of been tackling those on the show. And someone just asked probably the question everyone's asking out loud or to themselves about Arch Manning. Everyone's got a take on Arch Manning. So just how good's Arch Manning going to be? It directly involves, obviously, Texas, but then it's going to either directly or indirectly affect a whole lot of other teams. So the way I see this, I'm going to need you to decide if you agree with this or not. I don't think Arch Manning's going to be terrible. I don't see any scenario where he's terrible. So if you disagree with that, then there's a third scenario. But if you agree with that, I think there are two scenarios. Scenario one, he's elite. He's a game changer immediately. He's like Trevor Lawrence when he first showed up at Clemson. He's like Tua at Alabama. It doesn't matter that they're first-year starters. They're just immediately ballers. And they fundamentally change every game they play in. They fundamentally change the conference title race, the playoff race. He can win games with his legs and with his arm. He's a guy who, when you're going to play Texas, you're asking the question, how do we slow down Arch Manning? Because if he's that good, that's how you talk about it. You don't even say Texas, you say Arch Manning. That's scenario one. And then if that happens, like Wingo and DeAndre Moore, those guys at wide receiver dominate. You probably got multiple 1,000-yard receivers. Everything falls into place. Defense doesn't have to win the game for you. That's scenario A. Scenario B is he's serviceable. Good enough, serviceable. He has ups and downs. I would think about this like Tennessee had to deal with Nico last year. Tennessee had Nico. He's a first-year starter. You're accepting that there are going to be some ups and downs there. He makes some incredible throws every now and then. He makes some egregious mistakes every now and then. But he's your guy. He's the franchise. But in the meantime, you occasionally have these prolonged periods of drought. You got first halves where you're not finding the end zone. What has to happen? Well, you got to be able to run the ball effectively. You got to be able to control the ball at least. And defense has to win you games. Defense has to buy you time to get your affairs in order offensively. Now, the answer to the question, I think, is one of these two. I lean probably a blend a little more towards the first one. I think Arch is going to be incredible. He's got everything around him to be incredible. But I think one of the messages that I keep hearing from people who doubt him is, well, now, Quinn Ewers wasn't a star last year, and Arch couldn't beat him out. So what does it say? That Sark didn't even feel comfortable putting him in last year. If he was really that good, then he would have benched him. Okay. I think there's a whole lot more to it than that. I think Sark knew last year that Quinn Ewers was hurt, but able to go. I think he trusted him. I think there was a loyalty factor there. You can think about that whatever you want, but I'm pretty sure I'm spot on with that. That doesn't mean that he didn't know Arch Manning was the truth as well. Last year Napier went with Graham Mertz over DJ Lagway. Mertz got hurt. Lagway comes in, plays really good football. Florida turns it around down the stretch. Well, you could look at that and say, how could he have been starting Graham Mertz over DJ Lagway? Well, it's because he thought that guy gave him the best chance to win. Arch Manning could be incredible this year. I'm not going to look at Steve Sarkisian in retrospect and say, how could he have not played him last year? There's a lot that goes into that. Most of it you can't pretend to know firsthand. So I don't know. If I'm doubting him, it's not going to be because of that. I'll put it that way. A lot of quick trips. You saw Texas schedule a second ago. A lot of quick trips on the road between Texas and where they're going to go play this year. A lot of you making the road trips, maybe. I highly encourage you. You don't have to stop at the Evil Beaver all the time. I know it's big in that part of the country. Quick Trip's got what you need as well. And they are the exclusive fuel provider of this show. They make it possible for us to go on tour. We went to Austin and visited with Sark. They made it possible. Okay, so Quick Trip's got the gas. Quick Trip's got the cold brew on tap. They got the protein shakes. They got cases of water. I don't know what you need. Maybe some pizza. But what they are is they're a friend to us, and we appreciate it, and they can be a friend to you as well. Let's move on. Oh, look at this. I have some chaos. What are some things that could happen this year that would just be pretty chaotic, that really throw a wrench in the blender, as Meemaw would say? I've got one. You remember the SEC last year, how there was a lot of teams that were pretty good, but no one was really elite? And that bore itself out in the playoff. You remember that? What if that's the Big Ten this year? The Big Ten's been really good about separation at the top. They've been really good about, by season's end, there's a clear tier 1, and then there's a pretty big gap between whatever, like tier 3. Sometimes there is no tier 2. Well, that wasn't the SEC last year. Last year, the SEC, by the end of the regular season, had 6 teams with 2 or 3 losses by the end of the regular season. And no one really stood out. And then the Big Ten had 4 teams that were 10-2 or better, and then there was a big gap. And Illinois was kind of in the gap, but there was a big gap. What if the Big Ten looks more like the SEC this year? Now, here's why that could be chaotic. It could be that you just don't have a team that emerges and you don't make it to the national title game. But imagine this group. Think about the group of teams I'm about to read you. Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, USC, Washington. Those teams all have win totals of somewhere between 7.5 and 10.5. Now, you would think that 2 or 3 of them are going to elevate at the expense of the others, right? That's the modus operandi of the Big Ten. What if they don't? What if they all just compress? And it's a bunch of 9-3, maybe some 2-loss teams scattered in there, and then you get to playoff selection time, and the SEC had 2 or 3 teams just totally elevate, like the Big Ten did last year. And what if maybe the ACC has a couple of teams elevate? What if the Big 12 championship game is an undefeated versus a 1-loss, and the 1-loss wins it to where it's pretty clear both of them are going to go to the playoff? What if Notre Dame's plenty good enough to make the playoff? Well, what you could have is you could have your version of Bama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss on the outside looking in, only it could be Penn State and Oregon and Michigan on the outside looking in or something like that. Now, is that chaotic? Well, it depends on who you're a fan of, but I'll tell you what it really would hurt. It would hurt the Big Ten's argument they're making right now. Tony Petitti's out there making the argument that we want the AQ structure. We want the AQ model where we're guaranteed 4 teams per year. It'd be a bad look in the middle of making that argument if you couldn't get 4 teams in the playoff this year. It happened to the SEC last year. You can go, by the way, if you want to. You can go over to FanDuel and bet on every one of these things right now. You can go over there and you can get odds to win the Big Ten. You can get over/under win totals. You can get alternate win totals. You can get odds to win the national championship. You can go bet Ohio State, Michigan right now. Literally, the line is there for you to bet on. So you can do all of those things because of the exclusive odds provider of this show. It's a beautiful, beautiful hue of blue as well. We appreciate FanDuel. They make a ton of stuff available to us during the season that's proprietary, like they kind of just provide it to us. It adds a lot of context to the show, but that's available for everyone. If you don't bet, that's totally fine. You can just go over there and look. It's free to look. All right, let's wrap up the show tonight with bold predictions. I'm going to warn you as we do bold predictions here, this may be the boldest batch of bold predictions that we have the entire summer. So let's get it started. StatMat says Clemson, Penn State, and LSU will be the top 3 teams in the playoffs in that order. That's a 10. That's a 10 on the boldness scale. Clemson, Penn State, LSU finish 1, 2, 3. So not only is he saying all 3 of them got to finish top 3, he's giving you the exact order. That means all of them need to be like 11-1 minimum, and they all need to go win their conference title because this is after the title game weekend. And not only that, I mean, think about all the other teams out there that have to not be in the top 3. Like you can't have Texas up there or Georgia up there or Ohio State or Oregon. And all that happening perfectly, That's too many tumblers to fall into place for me. So that's a 10. Next up, we've got another multi-parter here. Andrew from Columbia, South Carolina said, neither Georgia, Texas, nor Alabama will make the playoff this year. So those are the number 2, 3, and 6 teams in the odds. That's a 9.75 for me. Think about the fact that all 3 of them are from the same league. If one of them was from each league, that'd be one thing. But that's the top 3 teams in the odds of the SEC that you're collectively asking to fall out. We know SEC teams are going to make the playoff. Like a minimum of 3 of them will make the playoff. So you're talking about like LSU, Florida, A&M, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Missouri, South Carolina. You're talking about a combination of those teams elevating, but knocking all of the favorites out. And that's a bridge a little bit too far for me. Individually, you could sell me on any of those teams missing the playoff, maybe even a pair of them, but all 3 of them missing's tough. Next up, this one's tough too. Agent PK said Florida State will win a playoff game. He's from North Dakota, by the way. I was going to go 10 on this, but I'm only going to go 9.75. Because remember, like Arizona State comes from nowhere last year. They win the Big 12. They make the playoff. Florida State, I mean, 2 years ago, they would have been a playoff team if it were a 12-team field. And Mike Norvell was the coach then, too. So it's not that we haven't seen it. It's just that I saw what happened last year. And so thinking that you could have that disastrous a fall off, and then it just scales right back up. Is that really how this works? Their win total is 7.5. You got to think they got to at least win 10 to make the playoff. That's a 9.75. And the last one here, I don't know. We need to check and see if this has ever happened. I guess it hasn't because we hadn't had a 12-team playoff for very long. Sam said this year there will be more than 4 schools with a tiger as the mascot that make it to the playoffs. Well, that means it's got to be 5. There are only 5, as far as we can tell, there were only 5 Tigers in FBS. Clemson, LSU, Auburn, Missouri, and Memphis, right? So they all got to make it? Clemson, okay. LSU, okay. Auburn, Missouri, Memphis, all of them got to make it. That is a 10. Very creative. Love the animal, but that's a 10 on the boldness scale. That's how bold predictions are done, though. Remember the rule around here. If you predict something that's 9.5 or higher on the boldness scale and it hits, you win a chalice of supremacy. So we got 4 chali on the line tonight. Chali is the plural of chalice. Appreciate you guys watching. We have got our next show coming at you Sunday. So we're going to take a nice little holiday break. Enjoy yourselves. Be careful with the fireworks. Be responsible out there boating or camping or doing whatever you guys are going to do. Plenty of sunscreen, Jesse. And we will see you back here same time Sunday night. Until then, for producer Jesse, for director Bradley, I'm Josh Pate. Have yourselves a great rest of your week, and God bless.